Welcome to Inside Athletic Training, the podcast where we dive into the world of athletic training in Major and Minor League Baseball. Today we're excited to have Dave Yeager, athletic trainer for the Milwaukee Brewers and the chairman of the PBATS internship program, on the show. Dave is here to talk about the internship program, what students can expect, and how to prepare for an internship in baseball athletic training. If you're a student aspiring to work in baseball, this is a can't-miss episode. And don't forget, the 2025 PBATS internship application process closes tomorrow on December 31st. Enjoy the show. All right, Dave, welcome back to Inside Athletic Training. Excited to have you on as our, I think you were our first guest on twice, and now you're our first guest on 3 times the show. So appreciate you taking some time out of your busy schedule to come and talk with us. A couple of weeks ago, you hosted and kind of your brainchild, the Athletic Training Student Symposium put on by PBATS. We had about 200 students listening live to a lot of our members talk about very important topics. One topic that you touched on, which is very relevant right now, is the PBATS internship program, something that you chair and you're very passionate about. So I wanted to discuss that with you. But first, for those that don't know you, feel free to share any information about yourself and your current title and team that you work for.
Well, thanks for having me again, Sam. I appreciate it. I guess just because we continue to do some stuff with the internship committee, I guess is why I get the opportunity to talk to you so frequently. But I appreciate the opportunity and the chance to kind of talk about what we're trying to do with PBATS and the internship group and what we're passionate about. I just finished my 13th season as a major league assistant and with the Milwaukee Brewers club. Currently, I am transitioning into a new role, a special assistant role for our high performance department with our organization. So my new role will be more big picture topics, processes, a lot of collaborative efforts between our medical and performance groups and player development groups. How that works and what all those entail, we're still trying to figure out, but
Sure.
that's kind of what I'm going to be doing next and what I'm looking forward to kind of getting into the next chapter, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome chapter for you previously as the assistant athletic trainer with the Brewers. Ton of success on your end and the team as well. So cool to see you transitioning into a new role. Like I mentioned, we're going to discuss today about the presentation you gave at the symposium about the PBATS internship program and kind of dive deeper into how we can better prepare students for the internship with PBATS if they may, be accepted for that. And for anyone out there who's listening, the PBATS internship portal is currently open. PBATS.com/internship. You'll find all the information there. But Dave, in your presentation, the first couple items you talked about were, number one, what can students do now to prepare for a potential internship? So let's start there. What do you recommend that students do now during the application process to prepare them for an interview and even so more prepare them for a potential internship with a club?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question. Actually, what I was getting into with that part of my presentation was what can students do now as students to prepare them for a job in baseball, right? Mm-hmm. And not necessarily the internship route. So we can kind of talk about the two together or a little bit separately. But to your specific question about what they can do now to prepare for an internship, there are some things that I think are particularly important. One is obviously you got to go through the application process, right, for PBATS, and as you mentioned, that is open now, and that's first and foremost the key. Like, you can't have an experience if you don't apply for that,
Sure.
for that experience, right?
Yeah.
But the things that you can do, that students can do to kind of help push them to the front of the line, I think have a lot to do with being selective about how they go about their application process. The how you build your resume and your cover letter, like what we tend to look for is someone who has a demonstrated desire to work in baseball, right? A passion for the athletic training profession and a passion for baseball medicine, right? And so, building your resume. We had some talks during our during the symposium that talked about how to build your resume appropriately to kind of demonstrate that is kind of a great step. We generally get somewhere around, well, we get hundreds of applications every year for internship positions, and when you look at the numbers, like we only we only accept probably close to 80, overall. And so, looking at ways to kind of maximize or optimize your matchmaking for the clubs when they're
Sure.
looking for that is key, right? Applying for clubs that are close to your academic institution, close to your school, because clubs tend to like to have relationships with local schools. It also makes it easier for the student to come in and out based on class schedules and things
Hmm.
like that, as opposed to having to mix and match for the summer. So optimizing your search and application to match clubs that are close to you. And that means not only the major league club, but looking at the minor league affiliates that are near you as well, and making sure that in your application um, you specify that you're open to minor league affiliates, and specifically this one and this one, right? That are close to your university. Other things that help you prepare and get ready for the internship once you've been selected, just include knowing your anatomy, right? Reviewing your
Hmm.
anatomy, brushing up as a student, preparing yourself to understand, what are your common evaluation strategies that you may have to utilize, and brushing up on your, obviously baseball's an upper extremity dominant sport. And so, particularly when we deal with pitchers, we have to understand the throwing evaluation, and we have to understand the physical demands and how to evaluate shoulders and elbows, and understand the anatomy that goes into that. So as a student, as you get ready to start your internship, like making sure that you hone in on those particular things. um, you can also focus on, um, since you already know you're going to be doing an internship, and you want to, with a specific organization, you want to inquire about, hey, like, what are some of the systems and processes that are in place, so that you as a student can prepare to be able to jump right in and do those things, and help with those things, right? And then the last thing that I think is important, um, and obviously there are probably some others, but one of the other things I think is important is just starting to build um, your own exercise library, and get familiar with common arm care routines or common rehab activities that are specific to the baseball athlete, and get yourself familiar with those things before you get there, so that like you can jump right in and insert yourself into, hey, how can I help? I can do this. I know this. Hey, what do you think about this? And kind of starting to blend into the workings of the medicine team, the sports medicine team, without having to like dip your toe in the water first.
Yeah. That's all super helpful. I think students will draw a lot from those key topics there in terms of preparing themselves for an internship. You've been in the training room in the big league clubhouse for over a decade, as you mentioned earlier. I'm sure you've conducted a number of interviews for interns or even much higher positions than that. You mentioned in your presentation a couple weeks ago that, everyone's going to come through college with the same baseline skills and knowledge, right? So have not had that experience to differentiate, have not worked with Dave or this person or that person to pick up different things. That said, and with that being the case, what do you look for differentiating factors when you are hiring for internships?
Yeah, well, I think the three main points, and I'm going to sound like a broken record to people that are listening that I talked to a lot here recently, but the three kind of general themes that I look for, whether it's an intern or whether it's for any other kind of staffing position, it's talent, passion, and personality, right? Like those three aspects. Now, for internships, the talent aspect probably takes a back burner, right?
Okay.
Because you don't you're a student, right? And so you haven't fully developed your talent pool. But we also look for, do you have the basic skills and the basic skill sets and knowledge that will fit what you're going to be doing, right? Have you taken an upper extremity course, or what is it, where are you in your academic program that kind of matches what you're going to be doing with us and that field. But the other two themes are probably, for an intern position, probably the most important, right? That passion and personality,
Yeah.
because it's a demonstrated, they speak to your motivation and your drive and your desire to learn and get better, right? And then your
Hmm.
personality, because that's what an intern is there for. Your job, in your internship, really ultimately is to learn, right? And so, when I interview and when I look and read and talk to people, like the goal is to try and get an estimate and a feel for what your drive and motivation is. I spoke to it again earlier about like a demonstrated desire to work in baseball, right? Well, why baseball, right? Are you a fan, or
Hmm.
what is it about the game that intrigues you, and things like that. Uh,
Yeah.
so the passion aspect or theme kind of talks about like, how are you motivated, and what are you into it for? Are you looking to just kind of build a resume, or are you like really interested in doing this, right?
Yep.
And then the personality aspect is about fit, right? How are you going to fit with our staff? And it's also about, okay, what kind of student are you? Are you accountable and responsible, right? Will you show up when we need you, right? Like, will you can we give you a task and trust that it's gonna get done, right?
Yeah.
Are you a humble learner, right? Like, and come into the experience with an open mind, because the things they say the real learning happens after you get out of school, right? And sometimes the things that you see in the workforce are steps beyond what you learn in the textbook, right?
Yep.
And so you're looking for somebody that's open-minded and able to be flexible enough to see like how these advanced concepts do connect to what you're learning in school and what you've learned as a student, and kind of be able to see the next levels of where these basic concepts go. Are you an inquisitive and curious student? Do you ask questions? Like, are you there to learn, right? And how you go about that. Can you communicate, and when um, you see things, can you bring them up? Are you confident enough to bring them up and share them and say, "Hey, I noticed this. What do you think about this?" And you know, and then be flexible enough to understand that like this job changes all the time, right? And sometimes our schedules need to adapt, and what we had planned today may not work out quite as well, and so we spend the rest of the day kind of like readjusting, right? And so for me, it's talent, passion, and personality that I look for, and those characteristics kind of stand out to help identify, especially for a student, the passion and personality that's going to fit and be successful in our system, and maybe even the profession as a whole.
hmm And one thing that's, I think, interesting about the PBATS internship program when you compare it to other sports leagues, for example, the NBA or the NHL or even the NFL, even a better example there. So if you're selected as a PBATS intern, there's a chance you could be at the major league level, but there's also a chance you could be at the minor league level. We spoke with Justin Kemp, who's now the minor league medical coordinator with the Royals, and he started his career in baseball at the major league level as an intern for PBATS president Nick Kenny and board member Kyle Turner. And he mentioned day one of the job, they told him, you're probably not going to, if you're with the Royals next year after your internship, you're probably not going to be at the big league level. Everyone has to go through the minor leagues just like players. And I thought that was pretty eye-opening. And he said that was great to know and good for expectation setting for him. So talk a bit about the kind of uniqueness of the PBATS internship program where you could start in the big leagues, you could start in the minor leagues, but ultimately the majority of people are going to get, cut their teeth and learn and make mistakes at the minor league level.
Yeah, I bet that's spot on, right? Like as an intern, a student affiliation, clinical experience, you could be at either spot.
Mm-hmm.
Um, both have, but like you said, ultimately, like when you hit the entry level workforce, you're probably going to start at the minor league level, right? And so there's pros and cons of getting experiences at both. I think when you get a clinical experience at the minor league level, you you get like this is what I'm getting into feel,
Yeah.
right? This is
Yep.
all right. Like this
Some
is
hands-on experience.
yeah, and it's also like, okay, this is what the real world in baseball medicine is like, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you're fortunate enough to get a major league experience, then you get an idea of, okay, like this is the best that it's going to be. Like this is the goal, right? This is what I'm trying to get to. So then when you get to the minor league workforce, like you understand, like, hey, like I'm working towards this, right?
Sure.
And you also get the experience of like, hey, like this is how the major leagues works. This is how major league athletes go about their business. This is how the major league staff does their job, right? And so you have a model for which you can kind of base things off of and
Yeah.
try and build your processes at the same time while you're learning. But that's a great point though, that you also get to cut your teeth and make mistakes that are not under the camera's eye and media speculation as you might be with at the major league level.
Yeah, and Justin mentioned that it was a little stressful being in the big league clubhouse, knowing that not that minor league baseball doesn't matter, but winning, some might say winning matters less than at the big league level. It's up for discretion. But he said when he got to the minor leagues, he could relax a little bit, be more comfortable and confident, which is really interesting for those out there looking to just do a major league only internship. Like Dave said and Justin said on last week's show, there's going to be pros and cons to both. So important to remember that. Dave, jumping into your presentation again here, you talked about the kind of what the internship program and the internship itself actually entails for students when they get there, when they might be accepted. You broke it down into two kind of silos of the day-to-day work, but also learning. I want to start with learning here. Three really key topics here. Being uncomfortable, number one, hands-on skills, developing there, and also investigating and being curious. So let's start with being uncomfortable or being comfortable being uncomfortable, as you said it. I know that's super important for you. Can you kind of elaborate on what that means for students in the internship program?
Well, it generally means that we don't know it all, right? And so we have to understand that, and that it means that we have to be comfortable in seeking out answers and looking for new information. As a student, that's much, that's the biggest deal, right? Because
Yeah,
as a
that's it.
student, you don't know much, like in the big picture, right? So learning is your number one priority as an intern. And so, your number one skill, your number one priority, as I said, is to learn. So that is looking at ways to connect the dots between what you're seeing in the training room and what you've learned in class. Look for ways to problem solve and critically think and the like, right? So that's what I mean by the be comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Like always learning, always understanding that you don't know everything and there's more to grasp. Excuse me. And so that's your goal. The other aspects, the hands-on skills, like the only way that you're going to get better with some of the things that we do in the training room and as a profession is to put hands on bodies, right?
Yep.
To understand what good tissue feels like compared to what chronic tissue might feel like, to understand what a positive special test like that Scott talked about in his presentation, to understand what a positive special test feels like compared to what a negative test feels like.
Yep.
And so it's about getting hands on bodies. It's about getting that experience. And if you can't physically do it based on where you're at on your clinical, right? But being around it, watching it, observing it, getting that experience so that you can, when you do have the opportunity to do it, you've had some exposure to it, and you can start, using that experience to filter through what you're doing.
Hmm.
And then it's I talked about it and when I talked about personality, just being inquisitive, right? And being investigative. So it's not just relying on your clinical instructor to answer your questions, right? Like if you have a question, go look for the answer, do your own research, and then come back, and then you're going to get more out of that discussion with your clinical instructor than you will of him or her just saying, well, this, right? Like, well, I read this. What do you think? And then you can banter and discuss back and forth, which is a much better learning experience than, what do you think? Well, I think this. Great. That's what I'll do, right? Like it involves that when you go out and investigate your questions ahead of time and come back with a theory and a thought process, it's a much better discussion with your clinical instructor than just you know taking their word for it, so to speak. Even though
I'm
their
sure.
word may be right, right? But
Sure. Yeah, and I'm sure that to you, someone who's been in the big leagues for over a decade, that shows you that they want it. They want to be there. They want to help out. They want to make an impact, not just, like we'll get into here in a second, not just, doing what you tell them. They want to really learn and grow, and I think that's important. And that kind of leads us into the
Well,
next topic.
like,
Yeah, go
yeah,
ahead.
sorry to interrupt, but the other thing about internships is they are long interviews, right? Like they're
Sure.
long interviews. For example, with the Brewers, we have hired several of our interns in the past, and that's because you get a feel for, again, their talent, passion, and personality, and when they just go through the motions, and they don't demonstrate these things of being inquisitive and jumping in and putting hands on, like, and getting the learning experience. It's harder to recommend them in the future for.
Sure, of course, yeah. And like I was saying, the next section of your presentation was getting into kind of what the day to day looks like for an intern, whether that's at the big league level or at the minor league level, as we touched on before. Everyone wants to be Dave Yeager running on the field to take care of players, at the big league level. That's the goal for the majority of people interning, I would assume. But that's a long way away. Not saying you can't make a quick leap to the big leagues. It's happened before. But when you are in the day to day of an internship, how important would you say it is for interns and young professionals even to take pride in doing the little things, to take pride in quote unquote the busy work, which, like you mentioned, which I think is a great way to say it, it's still a part of preparing the team to win. It still matters. So how do you kind of encourage an intern who has such big aspirations, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, getting in the clubhouse? Like, how do you encourage them to really treat every responsibility like it matters? Or is that just something that you expect?
Well, first of all, let me say I don't think anyone wants to be me running out on the field to take care of a player,
That's true. That's true.
if
Poorly
we're
said
running
by
out on the
me.
field to take care of somebody, then
Yeah, I should have said in the dugout taking care
got
of big league
problems.
players.
Yeah, I'd much rather just be seen, watching the game
There you
and,
go.
go from there. But yeah, no, I think this is a key thing, right? And again, not to kind of keep harping on it, but like when you when you go through these day-to-day duties that are assigned to you as an intern, and you take pride in them, and are you are you're in the moment, and you're focused on what your tasks are and doing them well, that speaks highly to your talent, passion, and personality,
Yep.
right? And how you go about stuff. Like you said, and like I mentioned in my presentation, like, things like making sure the trunks and the equipment is stocked and ready for the road trip, and making sure that the training room is prepared for the day, and those types of tasks they're not busy work, right? Like, they are part of preparing the team to win. Making sure that we're ready to treat our athletes and ready to do what we need to do, right? As a staff, and some people on the staff have the roles of making sure those things are ready to go, and a lot of times that falls on the intern. But it is a team group effort, and the intern, when they do those tasks, has a part in how our team is successful. It's also an opportunity to look at how those processes get done. You're assigned the task, and typically we do it this way, and this way. And as you're going through it, look for ways that you can make it better, right? And then not only are you contributing to the team, but you're contributing to how the team operates and how we're getting better. And that's key also. So I just think that wherever you're at, whether it's in a clinical immersive experience, or whether it's a athletic trainer in the minor leagues, or even at the major league level, it's about being in the moment and doing good work at that time, and then
Hmm.
and then all the other things, like you talked about, the goals of being at the major league level, or doing it for a long period of time. It's when you are focused on doing good work, I think that sets you up for opportunities and being prepared for when those opportunities arise.
Mhm. Yeah, and speaking of preparation, let's kind of jump back to we just talked about the day to day and what the internship actually looks like. We talked about how to prepare for the actual internship, but let's get into the interview process a bit, which is obviously hugely important. That's going to get you where you want to go. So sports performance staffs have gotten huge. There's so many people involved in hiring. When you look for, or start the interview process, explain to the listeners out there and students specifically how that process goes, maybe the length of time, what they can expect, who they might talk to, will they have to travel to meet with somebody? What should a potential intern expect out of interviewing with a big league club?
Yeah, I think it depends on the club, right? And how
Mm-hmm.
what their interview process and what their HR selection process is like, right? So I think probably the first thing to understand when students apply for a PBATS internship is that what PBATS role is in that process. And specifically, our role as a society is merely to I like to describe it as like we're a clearinghouse, right? Like
Yeah.
we collect all the applications and then we distribute those applicant pool information to the respective clubs of where people have applied to. And so then it becomes up to each team to go through their specific process, right? And how they select. And it'll depend on what the club's needs are. Do they have somebody? Do they do intern positions at the major league level or only at the minor league level or only at their spring training complex? What their time frames are like, and it's kind of individual. So historically, for example, at the major league level in Milwaukee, the student that we select is typically with us for the entire season, right?
Okay.
But that's not always the case at different places. Sometimes if they're in and out for small week blocks, 6 to 8 weeks, or maybe a little more or a little less. It just kind of depends on how that sets up. But it's different for each club, but there are a few points that we can make that are fairly consistent, right? Like in general, you're gonna interview with the medical staff, right? You may start out by talking to the head trainer or one of the assistant trainers or a coordinator that's in charge of the internship process for that club, and then it may disperse into more of a group panel or a couple other follow-up interviews for the staff. Those interviews could be phone or virtual. Generally for internships, it's not in person. So the beauty part, as we know in today's technological society, is we can do interviews on a Zoom call like this and and get what we need without having to bring people in and
Yeah.
coordinate all that stuff as well. Each person that's involved in the process, they've got a role, right, in evaluating you. So again, they're gonna look for the things that we've already talked about: personality traits and characteristics, your critical thinking ability, your skills that you may have, and your thought process, right? They're gonna go through and try and kind of nitpick and evaluate those through the interview process. Again, we're looking for fit. Who is somebody that is going to be the ideal student for us, right? And kind of go through that process. Those are kind of, primarily like from a basic interviews, that's what you're going to go through. You're also, like I said, you're going to be evaluated during the interview process. You're going to be given open-ended questions that are based on your resume and cover letter. And, they're going to want some deeper explanation. When you say
Yeah.
you collaborated with this, and this, what does that mean? What
Sure.
did you actually do? Like we're gonna dive into that. Sometimes your interviewers will give you some scenarios, realistic and hypothetical scenarios that, like, if this happens, how will you handle it, right? Because they're gonna want to, again, evaluate your thought process and your integrity and your characteristics, right?
Yep.
And then they may challenge you, right? Like with some academic questions, and kind of get an idea for what your knowledge base is and stuff. You're not expected to know all the answers, right? But we or the interviewers are generally trying to tease out some specific things about you, as far as like what again, your talent, passion, and personality, and how do you match up with maybe the two or three other candidates that they're interviewing.
Yeah, that's a great detailed kind of explanation of how the process might work to kind of get maybe students in the mindset of what they're going to be looking at when they're on the Zoom or something like that. One point I thought was interesting there, and it kind of relates to my conversation with Justin Kemp of the Royals about like a confidence and intimidation aspect. His was being on the job and being kind of, intimidated about, hey, I'm in the big league clubhouse here, my first day. But so if you're an intern sitting in that interview room with you and some Milwaukee Brewers medical staff members, and you ask an intern a question about how they would handle, a scenario, whether it's realistic or hypothetical, they're not going to know every answer, like you mentioned. How do you encourage, or what's your advice to a student who's like, well, how am I supposed to tell Dave Yeager, who's been in a decade long in the big leagues, how this should be handled? But I assume when people go out on a limb and try to explain what they're thinking, that's what means a lot to you. So how do you kind of encourage that when we're also telling people, hey, we don't be a know-it-all, you got to learn. How do you kind of balance that?
Well, that's a great that's a great question. I'll tell you that, what Justin described, like that kind of imposter syndrome, that
Yeah,
like, oh, what am I doing here? Like, I think at some point in our processes, we have all felt that
of
way,
course. Yeah,
right?
of
And
course.
so I think partly when I start an interview and start talking to people, like I start with like, hey, let's just talk about you, who you are, how, kind of build some rapport there, right? And kind of let them calm down and get comfortable with the discussion. But I also, try and stress that when we ask these questions, like, again, there's not a wrong and a right. Oftentimes there is what's your thought process, right?
Yep.
And most people that know me know that my general answer to a lot of questions is it depends. And so then I have the opportunity to explain it depends on what. Like, what factors would I take into account? What am I looking at? What things am I considering? And so it's okay to have opinions. Everyone does, right? Everyone has a thought or an idea or an opinion on why you do something, right? But the what I look for is, do you have a why? Can you back it up? Right? Can you explain what your thought process is when you do something? And that's what I'm looking for, right? And if you can back it up and it makes sense, it's not a wrong answer, right?
Yeah.
But if you have a hard time um, explaining why you did something, it can't be, well, my preceptor said, right? Like, that's not a good enough answer. It
Yep.
can't be, well, we've always done it this way. That's not a good enough answer, right?
Sure.
Like, there has to be a thought process. And that's essentially, if we're talking to students and students are listening here, like, it's okay not to know everything, but what you should have is a thought process on why you chose what you did, right? And that's what's important. because your
Yeah.
thought process is going to adapt and evolve as you learn. Bottom line,
Hmm.
like we
Yep.
all, what I do today is not what I did 10 years ago.
Yeah, and you mentioned, you're not going to know everything. But the last thing I do want to touch on is something that every single person I've talked to for almost 80 episodes of this show has said is the foundation of being an athletic trainer, and that's the anatomy. You talked about this in your presentation. Know your anatomy. When you speak about that, obviously there's textbooks and class to learn that. What else is there that you could recommend to students to even get better at knowing the anatomy, knowing how the body works, in preparation for maybe putting your hands on a big league player during an internship?
Well, I mean, man, that's a that's a tough that is a tough question, because know your anatomy, but how do you do that, right? Like, there's a difference between knowing and understanding, because knowing just is the basic aspect of, like, well, there's this muscle that attaches here and here,
Sure.
but understanding also implies some application process, right? Okay,
Yeah,
this
that's a good way to
muscle
explain it.
attaches here and here. This muscle is involved in this action. When I do this test, I am testing that this particular muscle. Or when athletes perform this activity, these muscles are involved. That that's a deeper understanding of the anatomy, right? And
Yep.
how the structures actually are applied. And so it becomes knowing your anatomy, yes, is about, what tissues attach where and how they act, but it also is about, um, you know, what 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 structures and things are involved in this particular sports skill or this particular sports performance. And so I think learning your anatomy is also about learning the sport and learning the culture of the game and having a feel
Sure.
for the game. And so understanding some deeper aspects of the biomechanics of pitching, for example. And so when you understand some of those concepts, then you have a better understanding of what the player has to be able to do, and then you
Hmm.
can connect the dots to the this muscle attaches here and does this action kind of scenario. That's I don't know if I directly answered the question, but that's kind of what I think of knowing the anatomy. It's a hierarchy of understanding. Okay, here's this tissue, here's this muscle, here's this tendon, here's this ligament, and here's the basic things of what they do and where they attach. But then it's also about starting to develop a feel for how they actually are involved with what we see on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great answer in terms of the baseline, knowing the anatomy, but also the application and how do you use that as a professional to keep players healthy and get them back on the field, which is the ultimate goal of the athletic trainer and the healthcare professional in sports. Definitely useful information there. Well, Dave, this has been awesome. I want to give you a second here. As we mentioned, for all the students out there, pbats.com/internship, you can find the application, the guidelines for applying, all the materials you'll need. There is still over a month left to submit applications. But Dave, is there anything, as the chair of the internship committee and someone who's been in the game for years and years, anything you recommend interns do between now and the time, they start to get calls back? Anything, last words you want to leave with students who are looking to apply this year?
Well, I just want to encourage students to apply, right? Like the you never know what opportunities lie in front of you until you kind of put yourself out there and try and get that exposure. You asked early on about what students can do to set themselves apart, right?
Yeah.
Well, we talked about what you can do to kind of prepare for the internship, but the big question I also get is, what can I do as a student to help me stand out when I start looking for a job? And in baseball, one of the things that we look for is baseball experience. And there is no better way to get baseball experience than to participate in a program like the PBATS internship program. And so I just want to encourage students to apply and try and take advantage of the opportunities that PBATS and our member clubs offer from that. It is our direct link between the professional baseball community and the academic community, right? And
Yep.
how we can educate and teach the next generation of baseball practitioners, and that's what PBATS is about. We're an educational society, and I that's why I have been so passionate about the internship committee and our activities, is because we are playing a role in directly affecting our profession in the future.
Yeah, very well said. And Dave, we appreciate you coming on the show again for the third time here. And, we wish you all the best luck in your new role with the Brewers.
Well, I appreciate it, Sam. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Inside Athletic Training Podcast. For more information about PBATS or the PBATS internship program, visit PBATS.com. See you next time.